Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll continue where we left off in this most revealing book entitled The Global Vatican. The Global Vatican by former ambassador to the Holy See, Francis Rooney. Taking an inside look at the Catholic Church, world politics, and the extraordinary, and I add the word prophetic, relationship between the United States and the Holy See. The beast and the image of the beast. That's the way I see it. Revelation chapter 13 reveals this unholy alliance between Washington and Rome, between the seat of our federal government and the beast of Revelation 13. It's the first beast and the second beast. The beast and the image of the beast. The sea beast and the wilderness beast. He causes the whole world to worship the first beast. That's what role the United States government plays in biblical prophecy. Now we're talking about the presidency of Harry S. Truman. And before we even continue, we want to apprise the listeners, those who aren't already aware, that Harry Truman was a Freemason. Not only a Freemason, but a 33rd degree Freemason. He was an oath-spitting Luciferian. We know that from Albert Pike's book, Morals and Dogma, that the higher degrees of Freemasonry, 30, 31st, the 32nd, and 33rd degree, are sworn Luciferians. They know what Freemasonry is really all about. It's the worship of Lucifer. Harry S. Truman was a dual Mason, which means he rose to the top of both the York and the Scottish Rite. He was a very devout Freemason. And being a Freemason of the Luciferian kind, he was also subject to the authority of the Jesuit general. He served the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church. Now, what we're talking about is the period leading up to the Cold War and the so-called holy war against godless, atheistic communism. And Harry Truman was simply aligning himself behind the Roman Catholic Church, who was, according to this author, leading the fight against godless communism. While the whole world was engaged in battle against the fascists, the Roman Catholic Church, according to this author, was already focusing on the spread of communism. And Harry S. Truman, being one who sought the approval of the papacy, seeing how he sought the approval of his Jesuit general, aligned himself behind the Roman Catholic Church, and then set about going around the country, posing as a Protestant himself, speaking to other Protestant organizations, trying to recruit them into, a united, quote-unquote, Christian front against communism, with the Roman Catholic Church leading the parade. And I view the Cold War as literally a Jesuit-inspired opportunity to recruit Protestant support for Catholic motives. It was an ecumenical movement. It was part of the Counter-Reformation to solicit Protestant support for a papal agenda and to put a common enemy, godless communism, as a uniting force for all quote-unquote Christians, no matter what denomination. And this was only possible because for nearly 200 years, futurism had been taught in the Protestant churches. That the Antichrist spoken of in the Bible is a future single individual that comes just before Christ returns and signs a 7-year peace treaty with the Jews, with Israel. And that, by default, exonerates the papacy. No longer could Protestants claim that the papacy, the office of the popes, could be the Antichrist of the Bible. So this ecumenical movement with the godless communist boogeyman as the motive was successful, or at least became successful after a few last lingering Protestant protests were wrung out. Now, we concluded at the end of the quote on page 105, but for continuity, we'll back up to the top of the page, 105, if you're following along in your own copy of the book. Speaking of Harry Truman, he says, a devout Baptist. Now, look. If you're a Baptist, you cannot be a Freemason. I know the Baptist Church are full of Freemasons, and the Baptist Church has gone to war against Freemasonry. Whether they've been successful or not is yet to be determined in the future, but I suggest that Freemasonry, just like the Antichrist, doesn't die easily, and that Freemasonry will still control the Baptist churches unless there is an open war against Freemasonry in the Baptist churches, and they rout them out, root and branch. But Harry Truman, a 33rd degree Freemason, a dual Mason, one who was working for the Roman Catholic Church, one who was working for his Jesuit general, presented himself to the world as a Baptist. Okay? Now he says, a devout Baptist, Truman saw religious faith with its emphasis on, quote, the worth and dignity of the individual man and woman, unquote, as the fundamental precondition for personal freedom and world order. And world order, Truman believed in a world order, didn't he? Not a heavenly order, a world order. And as the antidote to communist totalitarianism. Now, we're all told that communism is totalitarianism, and we all pretty well accept that as true. I don't wish to debate with anybody whether or not communism is totalitarianism, but what is never talked about and what is denied is that Roman Catholicism is totalitarianism. Historically, totalitarianism. And it's more totalitarian today than it ever was, despite its ecumenical front. Roman Catholicism is totalitarianism. That's why the New World Order is going to be global government by the volition of a single man, and that single man is the papacy. That's totalitarianism, isn't it? Now, this was not simply a spiritual epiphany for Truman, it was a mission statement. Okay, here is his mission statement. This is what's motivating Harry Truman. Quote, this is the supreme opportunity for the church. Now, we can argue whether or not he was speaking about the body of Christ or the Roman Catholic Church. I assert he's talking about the Roman Catholic Church. This is the supreme opportunity for the church to continue to fulfill its mission on earth. The Protestant Church, the Catholic Church, and the Jewish synagogue, bound together in the American unity of brotherhood, must provide the shock forces to accomplish this moral and spiritual awakening. No other agency can do it. Unless it is done, we are headed for a disaster and we would deserve. Okay? If we do not unite the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, and the Jewish synagogue under the unity of American brotherhood and resist this godless communism, we will deserve the disaster that results. All right? Now, this is an ecumenical message. Others might see other things in it, but no doubt it is an ecumenical message. Now, what has been the historical approach of the Roman Catholic Church toward Protestantism? Well, it began at the Council of Trent and the creation of the Jesuit order. It's a declared war of annihilation. That's what the Council of Trent represents to Protestantism. A declaration of open war of annihilation against Protestants. And what do we know about the Jewish synagogue? Well, they reject Jesus Christ altogether. And as a matter of fact, the Roman Catholic Church calls the Jews Christ killers. And they also have preached historically replacement theology, that the Roman Catholic Church now replaces the Jews as the chosen people of God. So, what is Harry Truman really preaching? That the Protestant churches and the Jewish synagogues join the Roman Catholic Church and fight for her benefit. You see how he served his Jesuit general, this 33rd degree dual Freemason, this Luciferian, Harry Truman? The ecumenical movement. This never would have been possible. No Protestant would have listened to this speech and joined the Roman Catholic Church in any effort if it still believed that the papacy was the office of the Antichrist of the Bible, the little horn, the son of perdition, the man of sin, on and on and on. That's the basic foundation of Protestantism. That's what they protest, the Antichrist, the papacy. If there's no protest against the papacy, there's no Protestantism. And that's the strategy the Jesuits concocted at the Council of Trent to destroy Protestantism without a fight. To literally take over their pulpits, put Protestant-looking pastors behind the podium, and preach futurism. That's all you got to do to destroy the Protestant church. And they did. And so Harry Truman, after nearly 200 years of preaching futurism in this country, is testing the Protestant water to see how effective futurism has been to destroy the Protestant character of Protestantism. He's preaching ecumenical. He's preaching uniting the Protestant church with the Catholic Church to fight this common enemy, this godless communism. All right. With that background, I'll continue. He says, as the Cold War scholar William Iddenbaden wrote of this Columbus speech, quote, Truman was beginning to lay the theological foundation for opposing the Soviets. Unquote. The theological foundation. It's another crusade. But this time, it's going to destroy the Protestants by just simply getting them to join the crusade with the Roman Catholic Church. Just testing the Protestant waters. How effective has our mission to destroy Protestantism been? How effective has futurism been in destroying the Protestant belief that the papacy is the Antichrist? Now we're going to talk about the theological foundation for opposing the Soviets. Every Christian looks for a theological justification for war, don't they? They don't want to go to war against God's will. Certainly if they're going to go to war and draw blood, they want God to be on their side, don't they? So they create a theological basis for this Cold War against the Soviet Union by simply calling the Soviet Union godless and atheistic. Now, speaking of Truman, it says, his own Protestant roots notwithstanding, Truman envisioned a special role for the Roman Catholic Church in the struggle he foresaw against communism. Not only did the church possess the largest and broadest Christian constituency in the world, including, by the end of the war, a quarter of the American population, but it also vocally led the charge against communism from the beginning, while the world focused on fascism. In his encyclical Divini Redemptoris on atheistic communism, is the interpretation of the title of the encyclical, on atheistic communism, in 1937, Pope Pius XI had clearly and forcefully laid out the Church's position. When Truman enlisted the Catholic Church in America's fight against the communists, America was really just joining a fight the Roman Catholic Church had been waging for years. See? Roman Catholic Church leading the fight against godless communism, and it's Truman out enlisting the American people to support this crusade. Now, not long after his speech in Columbus, President Truman received a grand, if not quixotic, plan to use the power of religion to combat Soviet communism, with Pope Pius XII out in front. Truman's idea was to bring together the religious sects of the world, kind of sounds like a new world religion, doesn't it? To bring together the religious sects of the world in a phalanx of the faithful, a unified force of godliness that would countervail the propagation of atheistic Marxism. They're going to align all the religious of the world against godless atheism. That's Freemasonry. That's ecumenism in its truest sense. Unite all the religions of the world. That's Freemasonry. That's Jesuitism. That's the New World Order. He was living true to his Jesuit and Freemasonic ecumenical ideals. As Truman wrote in his letter to the Pope on November 21st, 1946, America prayed that, quote, all moral forces of the world will unite their strength and will create well-being, peace, security, and freedom and an enduring world order, unquote. They're putting up the Jesuits, organizing the Bolshevik Revolution, installing Jesuitism into communist Russia, is using Russia as the giant boogeyman to unite all of the religions of the world. And Truman is a cheerleader for the Pope. And a New World Order is the objective. Now, he says communism was first and foremost an ideology. The best way to defeat a bad set of ideas, believed Truman, was with a better set of ideas. An ecumenical set of ideas, right? Behind the Roman Catholic Church. He said Pius XII welcomed Truman's letter. The Pope was eager for closer ties to the United States. This was one reason in 1944 that he had offered the job of Secretary of State to his old friend Cardinal Spellman, Archbishop of New York, an appointment which would have made Spellman the first American Cardinal Secretary in history. And in parentheses, the author says there's yet to be one. Listen, Spellman turned down the Pope on the grounds that he could do more for the Church, that is, to do more for the Roman Catholic Church in his position in the United States than in Rome. Spellman turned down an opportunity to become Secretary of State of the Vatican, to stay here in the United States to help the second beast cause the whole world to worship the first beast. It says, as we'll see, he continued to be a vital channel between the Vatican and important American institutions during a critical time in the history of both. Cardinal Spellman had a huge role to play during his service to the Vatican. And he had access to the White House. He had access to the Supreme Court. He had access to Congress. He had access to the nation's military might and to the greatest intelligence gathering and propaganda system devised in the history of mankind. Why would he want to take a cut in pay to become Secretary of State of the Vatican? He says another continuing channel of communication in the post-war years was Myron Taylor, still filling the role he had been appointed to under Roosevelt. On November 23, 1946, 2 days after writing the Pope, Truman announced the reappointment of Taylor as personal representative of the President to the Vatican. The Pope was just one of several religious leaders Myron Taylor consulted over the next several years. He shuttled among Anglicans in Canterbury. Now think ecumenism here. They're all on the same page. Myron Taylor, Harry S. Truman, the Vatican, they're all on the ecumenical bandwagon. It says Myron Taylor consulted over the next several years. He shuttled among Anglicans in Canterbury, Lutherans in Berlin, Calvinists in Geneva, Orthodox Christians in Istanbul, and Catholics in Rome, attempting to forge a kind of alliance President Truman envisioned. President Truman didn't envision this. The Pope gave him the vision. All right? Taylor reported on his progress directly to Truman, mostly in secret. Remember, Taylor was a personal representative. The United States was not ready to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Vatican. There was too much Protestantism yet in the country. So Taylor was simply appointed by the president to represent him personally. And Congress had nothing to do with it, because Congress has to answer to the people, right? Now, he shuttled among Anglicans, Canterbury, let me find out where I was at here. Calvinists in Geneva, Orthodox Christians in Istanbul, Catholics in Rome, attempting to forge the kind of alliance President Truman envisioned. Taylor reported on his progress directly to Truman, mostly in secret. The president was initially very hopeful. Quote, "Looks as if he and I may get the morals of the world on our side," unquote, Truman wrote to his wife Bess in 1947 after consulting with Taylor. Quote, "I may send him to see the top Buddhist and the Grand Lama of Tibet. If I can mobilize the people who believe in a moral world against the Bolshevik materialists, we can win this fight," unquote. Sounds pretty ecumenical to me, right? Uniting the Roman Catholic Church with the Protestants, the Calvinists, the Lutherans, the Baptists, the Orthodox, even the Buddhists and the Taoists and the Dalai Lama. Kind of reminds you of that ecumenical meeting John Paul II had in Assisi with all the religious leaders of the world. They all prayed together, don't you know? And they all mutually recognized the papacy as the leading spiritual component of the world. They all acknowledged the Pope as the leader of the religious world, the greatest moral authority on the planet. Okay? What the papacy and the Jesuits and Harry S. Truman were doing back here preceded John Paul II by several decades. The ecumenical movement is full steam ahead during the Truman administration. Now he says, perhaps bolstering his optimistic view and certainly corroborating it, President Truman had seen the soft power of the Holy See at work in June of 1946 when he sent former President Herbert Hoover to urge the newly elected Roman Catholic, I will add, Juan Perón, bitterly opposed to the United States, to donate grains to Europe to help alleviate the hunger there. Truman was informed that Perón would see Hoover, despite the Argentinians' feelings toward America, because the Pope had already requested this humanitarian aid. Hoover's personal diaries note that, quote, had his friend Hugh Gibson use a Vatican connection to get his first interview with Perón. So the Vatican is front and center in American foreign and domestic policy. That's what the listeners should glean from all of this, is that the United States does nothing without the lead of the Roman Catholic Church, without the lead of the Vatican in foreign and domestic policy. Now he says Myron Taylor at first first met with a positive reception on his travels to religious leaders, but before long, though, his mission was hindered by differences dating back to the schism between the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches. Oh, we're just getting to some really juicy stuff. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings, and to his kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation, under Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you want to hear Inquisition Update continue on this network, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. And if you wish to contact me, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. tom@seawaves.us. Now we're talking about Myron Taylor again, the personal representative of Presidents Roosevelt and Truman, a papist par excellence, ecumenically going around the world trying to get all the religions of the world behind the papacy, who is leading this fight against godless communism. It says Myron Taylor at first met with a positive reception on his travels to religious leaders. Before long, though, his mission was hindered by differences dating back to the schism between the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches in the 11th century and between Roman Catholics and Protestants in the 16th. In other words, Myron Taylor ran up against a little protest against aligning themselves behind the Roman Catholic Church. Seems futurism hadn't completely run its course yet. More testing the waters to find out how far futurism had gone to virtually exonerating the papacy and raising the papacy to the spiritual ruler of the world and obligating every quote-unquote religious person in the world to align himself behind the Pope for the creation of a new world order. Are you following this? He says, along with theological disputes, the old animosities and resentments still simmered. To some Protestants, Catholicism was little better than communism. To some Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox sects were in league with the communists, to the point of being a state church in Russia and other communist countries. Ties between state and church remain tight in Russia even today, says the author. President Vladimir Putin is reported to confer frequently with the Archimandrite Tikhon Sevkenov, a high-level Orthodox prelate. In July of 2012, when a Moscow musical group staged a protest in an Orthodox church over the unseemly links between the Putin regime and the church, its members were promptly arrested. The episode only fueled more speculation of church-state collaboration. Church-state collaboration. You know, the Bible speaks of the church-state collaboration. It's called the woman riding the beast. The woman being the church, the beast being the state. Okay, the woman rides and therefore controls the beast. Now, this Roman Catholic author is putting down church-state collaboration in Russia, but the Roman Catholic Church cannot survive without the state. It has been historically the state that does the Vatican's business of persecuting heretics, of waging wars, of advancing the papal agenda. It's the Vatican, or the church, that rides and controls the beast, controls its foreign and domestic policies. This book is more proof of that than any other Roman Catholic book I've ever read on the program. It's the pot calling the kettle black. The only problem with Russia in Rome's mind is it's the Eastern Orthodox that control the state in Russia instead of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, the Eastern Orthodox is just as Catholic as the Roman Catholic Church. They're still idolatrous. They're still blasphemous. They still, well, they don't want the Pope to rule over them. But they are an idolatrous religion, claiming Christianity, but then preaching and teaching contrary to the Gospels, contrary to the teaching of the Bible. It's just another counterfeit form of what is believed to be Christianity today. Now, without getting bogged down in another discussion about that, we'll continue in part 2 of this chapter, entitled, by the way, Common Ground. That's what the Vatican depends upon to advance this futurist agenda. This New World Order agenda is common ground and the common good. All right? While Taylor's mission of peace was dissolving into internecine Christian quarrels, that is, the quarrels between the Catholic Church and the Protestants, and the Catholic Church and the Orthodox, a more pragmatic U.S. effort was meeting success in Rome. The CIA the post-war successor of Wild Bill Donovan's Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, was attempting to block the Communist Party from gaining power in the Italian elections in 1948. The agency found a willing and able ally in the Vatican. Why would they find a willing and able ally in the Vatican? Because the OSS was run by the Roman Catholic by the Roman Catholics in control of it, just as the CIA is run by Roman Catholics. Over the CIA almost always rules a Knight of Malta. Okay? So it's just the American branch of the Vatican intelligence apparatus. That's what the CIA is. Now, it says, of course, this was not the first time American intelligence operations and the Vatican worked together. During the war, the OSS took great interest in the intelligence resources of the Vatican. One reason William Donovan had met the Pope in the spring of 1944 and found the church to be a provident, if occasionally unwitting, source of information. Copies of reports filed by the Vatican's nuncio to Japan, for example, were mined for valuable information about Allied bombing targets. As noted earlier, Harold Tittman made valuable use of the Vatican diplomatic pouch to get his communiques transported out of Italy. Along with such OSS successes had come some glaring embarrassments. The most infamous was the quote-unquote vessel case. In the fall of 1944, the OSS had begun purchasing reports that appeared to come directly from inside the Vatican's Secretariat of State. The supplier, known to OSS officials as Vessel, was someone who evidently had access to sensitive materials, including verbatim transcripts and detailed descriptions of conversations between the Pope and other heads of state. Other heads of state. That's right. The whole world worship the beast. He reigneth over the kings of the earth. Okay? The Pope rules over the kings of the earth and communicates and has concordats and diplomatic relations with all the kings of the earth. You know he would be a tremendous source of information, wouldn't he? That's why the CIA is interested. That's why the OSS is interested. That's why the governments of all the world are interested in a relationship, a close working relationship with the Vatican. And the Vatican is the dispenser of information. It gives information and it, well, doesn't give information whenever it's appropriate for the Vatican. He says the supplier, known to OSS officials as Vessel, was someone who evidently had access to sensitive materials, including verbatim transcripts and detailed descriptions of conversations between the Pope and other heads of state. So valued were these materials that they were promptly distributed to top levels of the American government, including President Roosevelt. Not until February of 1945 was the truth discovered. Vessel was a fraud. The tip-off came from Myron Taylor after one of the reports carried a transcript of a purported conversation between Taylor and Japanese Ambassador Ken Harada. This conversation, Taylor told OSS, never occurred, nor had any of the other dialogue in purported transcripts purchased by the OSS from Vessel. Every report was fabricated by an Italian scam artist, Virgilio Scatolini, who had once briefly worked inside the Vatican. Who do you suppose was putting out that bad information? Was it just a local Italian scam artist? Or was it maybe the Jesuit general? Duplicity in capital letters. That's what Rome is. It can't be trusted. The Antichrist can't be trusted. Satan himself can't be trusted, nor his vicar. And this unholy relationship between the Vatican and the United States government had its foibles. Now, following the OSS wins and losses with the Vatican during the war, Rome was where, in 1948, the recently organized CIA undertook its first major covert operation. That spring, the Italian Communist Party, the PCI, and the Italian Socialist Party, the PSI, were joining forces in an effort to wrest power from the Christian Democrats, the moderate party supported by the Vatican. The Pope was deeply concerned that the socialist communist bloc could very easily win plurality, unquote, according to a CIA intelligence report in January of 1948, and, quote, emphatically agrees that all anti-communists should form a bloc in order to give the electorate a clear choice between communism and anti-communism, unquote. Another CIA report dated March 5th methodically outlined what a communist victory would mean to Italy and the world. Quote, there would follow a discreet but rapid communist infiltration of the armed forces, the police, the national administration, which would eventually lead to Italy becoming a fully developed police state under open and exclusive communist control. All right? That's the propaganda coming out from the CIA, from the Vatican. If the communists get control, they will first get control of the armed forces, the police, and the national administration. That was the fear-mongering that Rome did about the communists. They will first get a control of the armed forces, the police, and the national administration. Now I want to ask my listeners a question. What do you think Rome would go after if she were to infiltrate a country like she did the United States? I mean, obviously, it was feared, Rome feared more than anybody, that if the communists got control, they would first get control of the armed forces, then the police, and then the national administration. I'm telling my listeners, if you want to see Rome's power in this country, that's where you'll find it. The armed forces, the police, and the national administration. And isn't that what we're discovering in this book? Isn't that what we're discovering? He said, which would eventually lead to Italy becoming a fully developed police state under open and exclusive communist power. If you want to turn the United States into a complete police state, you must first get control of the armed forces, the police, and the national administration. That's where we look for the Roman influence to show up. That's where our police state's coming from. The military, the police, and the national administration. It's hideous to think, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to talk about these things vis-a-vis other countries. But when we start seeing this influence in our own country and see what that influence has done in other countries throughout history, it's a sobering reality. It's a sobering concept. Frightful. While the world was worrying about the communists getting control of the armed forces, the police, and the national administrations, the Vatican was getting control of our armed forces, the police, and our national administration. And not only that, but they were preaching behind our Protestant pulpits. What could be the eventual consequences? I believe we're seeing them today. And none of it would have been possible. Absolutely none of it would have been possible had there been an audible Protestant voice in this country warning Americans what would happen if ever the greatest of all evils to be feared in a nation ever got control of our military, our police, and our national administration. Roman Catholicism, the papacy, the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist of the Bible. Because that papacy, if it ever gets control of the armed forces, the police, and the national administration, this country literally becomes the military force necessary to cause the whole world to worship the first beast, the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy. A fully developed police state. That's what they've achieved in this country. And all the while we're just stark raving mad about the radical fundamentalist Muslims. You see how they've diverted our attention? Boogeyman after boogeyman. First it was communism, now it's radical fundamentalist Islam. And in the meantime, Rome solicits Protestant help and gets it because they now believe in futurism. They don't believe the Pope to be the Antichrist anymore. It's a plan that had to have its origin in hell itself. No human effort could be this successful without Satan's help. He said, according to CIA analysts, the Soviet Union would then use Italian territory for air and naval bases, giving it control over Mediterranean shipping lanes. To avoid upsetting Catholics and courting civil war, the incoming communists would initially attempt to be, quote, more Catholic than the Vatican, unquote. But eventually, CIA analysts warned the communists would impose a police state over, quote, the most ancient seat of Western culture, unquote, while, quote, devout Catholics everywhere would be gravely concerned regarding the safety of the Holy See, unquote. Still trying to convince the world that this is a threat against Christianity, and that the seat of the papacy is its eventual target. What message does that sound? That the whole quote-unquote Christian world needs to get in line behind the Pope to help bolster, support, and proliferate the power, influence, and authority and control of the papacy. That's an ecumenical ideal, isn't it? That's a New World Order ideal, isn't it? The CIA descended on Rome and went to work. With the help of the Vatican's network of priests and other religious, what role are the priests and the religious playing? A political role. Listen what they did. The CIA descended on Rome and went to work. With the help of the Vatican's network of priests and other religious, and filtering resources through Catholic Action, a political front closely associated with the Vatican, the agency, that is the CIA, used propaganda and millions of lira to influence and ultimately orchestrate the outcome of the election. Rome's battlefield is politics. The Roman Catholic Church is first and foremost a political institution, not a religious institution, a political institution, because it is through the civil power that Rome gains the power. So it must first be political. And the CIA led this political war against the communists in Italy. And it used Roman Catholic priests and prelates as its Minutemen. Priests and prelates of the Roman Catholic Church were the ones carrying the money around, doing all the influence. CIA was a resource, a financial resource. He says, quote, we had bags of money that we delivered to selected politicians to defray their political expenses, their campaign expenses, for posters, for pamphlets, unquote, recalled CIA officer Mark Wyatt, who worked on the project. Excuse me. So we have an admission by the CIA. They just flooded the Roman Catholic Church with money. Whose money, I'll leave you to decide, but nonetheless, it was American currency, filtered through Catholic Action, the same Roman Catholic organization that was running a crusade, an inquisition against the Serbs, the Orthodox Serbs in the former Yugoslavia. American money. And they defeated the Soviets. Okay? But what did it do? It solidified the war for the Pope. He says, suitcases stuffed with cash were handed off in the lobby of a 4-star Rome hotel. While perhaps rudimentary as far as covert operations go, the tactics worked well. The Vatican-backed Christian Democrats carried the day with 48% of the vote and kept the communists at bay. Unquote. So, there you see how the CIA literally changed the outcome of an election in Italy for the benefit of the papacy. Because had the communists won, the papacy might have been under real threat. Godless atheism, godless communism might have overthrown the Vatican, might have used the Italian government to overthrow the Vatican. It's a war of survival. This so-called vicar of Christ wrings his hands constantly, looking for enemies on every side and uniting the world in his defense. He calls himself the vicar of Christ. Is Christ that worried about his throne? How does the papacy represent the Christ of the Bible when he acts nothing like him? Fear reigns and rules in the papacy's life. And what's most fearful from the papacy's standpoint is that the world will someday once just ignore him. Consider him no count. Consider him just a doddering old fool that thinks he's the representative of God on earth. And the world just begins to treat him like the cult leader that he is. That's the greatest fear. But that's all he really is. You see, there is but one God. And beside him, there is none else. And the God who was capable of creating all the heavens and the earth and everything that's in it with the word of his mouth, and then sending his Son to die for our sins, to redeem us from this Christless world, and to give us a hope of better days to come. This man calls himself his replacement and vicar on the earth. And yet he has to solicit the help of the whole world to stay alive. How could he represent the God of the Bible? Doesn't common sense dictate that he rules by fear alone? So what happens someday if the fear just leaves and nobody fears him anymore? That's the day that I pray for. But I fear it won't come until Christ comes. He says circumstances in Eastern Europe offered less reason to cheer. Events there confirmed every concern the church had ever voiced about communism. Soviet-backed governments confiscated church lands, nationalized Catholic church schools, claimed the right of investiture, and in a number of cases persecuted Catholic clergy. More justification for a unified religious war against godless atheist communism. All as cover for uniting the world behind the Pope. the Antichrist of the Bible. We'll continue where we left off tomorrow on the program. You've been listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. Stay tuned for more on First Amendment Radio.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.